This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com. Okay, we're going to go through the specimen paper for paper F5. And so do make sure you've downloaded it from the ACCA website and you've got it in front of you. Before we do go through it, note that, of course, you've the two sections. Section A is your multiple choice questions. They're all 2 marks, 20 questions. But, as will be clear when we go through them, and as the examiner says, some of the questions are a lot easier, some are a lot harder. You can do them in any order you like. But do make sure you don't waste too long on one question. If you're finding one question difficult, jump over it, do the others. If you've time, you can come back later and try and sort out the ones you found hard. Section B, you've got the long form questions, 310 mark, 215 mark. Again, you can do them in any order. Just make sure, obviously, that at the top of each sheet, you make it very clear which question you're answering. You know, question 2, part A, and so on. As far as the multiple choice section is concerned, do make sure you're clear about the bit at the very top of the question paper. It says, please use the space provided on the inside cover of the answer booklet. You're given an answer booklet to do your answers in, but the multiple choice you must fill in on the page that's allocated, because there'll be a page with all the question numbers down the side. And against each of them, 4 blobs. And the way you use it, if you think the answer to number 1 is, for example, A, you heavy in the blob, it's got to be in black ink. If you think number 2 is B, you heavy in B, and so on. If you do later look at it and change your mind, and for instance, question 1, you decide the correct answer is in fact D, you put a cross through your original answer and you heavy in the new one instead. But you must use that sheet. It's computer marked. Apparently quite a lot of people just write down the answers in a list. Oops. That won't do. You must use the sheet that's provided. And again, I have said, but it must be in black ink. Remember, you've got 15 minutes reading time before the exam. How you use that is your choice. I personally would have a quick look at the requirements for the section B questions. It might help me decide what order to do the questions in. Other than that, I would make a start on the multiple choice, because you're allowed to write in the exam paper itself, in the question paper, during the 15 minutes. It's simply you're not allowed to start writing in the answer book. So by all means, start going through the multiple choice, write on the question paper what you think the answer is. But remember, they're not going to mark the question paper. Make sure as soon as you're allowed to actually start the exam, that any answers you've written on the question paper, that you copy onto the answer sheet that's given you. Okay, let's start going through the questions. First of all, section A, the multiple choice section. One by one. And the first few are very short. They're all statement ones. Because they're fairly short, it shouldn't take you long to read it. And with all of them, I think it's very much you either know the answer, in which case, obviously, put the mark in, or it should be very obvious very quickly that you don't know the answer, in which case there's no point in spending hours on it. You still won't know the answer. If you don't know the answer, guess it. It's either 2 marks or 0. Even just guessing, obviously, there's a good chance of getting some marks. Anyway, we're not going to guess, let's do it. Number 1, always look at the requirements first, and it says which of the above statements is or are true. So let's read the statements. The following statements have been made about different types of standards in standard costing systems. Number 1, basic standards provide the best basis for budgeting because they represent an achievable level of productivity. That's not true. They're not what you might call achievable standards. A basic standard is one that sits there forever. It's not what we're hoping, what we're expecting, what we're trying to achieve. Number 2, ideal standards are short-term targets and useful for day-to-day control purposes. No, an ideal standard is the best, the ideal situation, the best you could ever hope for. Better, if we're using it for control, is standards that we think we actually can achieve, and then we can see if we do better or worse. So no, ideal standards are not useful for day-to-day control. So the answer is neither 1 nor 2. The answer is C. Number 2. The following statements have been made about management information systems. Which, again, of the following statements are true? This one, I think, really, you should be able to guess the answer. One of the statements, I think, is obviously not true, but it's information for management. And so 1, they're designed to report on existing operations. Yes, that's what management is interested in. 2, they have an external focus. No. The very name, it's management information. It's information to management or internal. It's not focused externally. So 1 is true, 2 isn't. So the answer is A. Number 3. The following statements have been made about zero-based budgeting. Now, I'm not going to give a lecture on zero-based here. There's a lecture on the website. But yet again, which of the following statements are true? Number 1, employees will focus on eliminating wasteful expenditure. Yes, that is true. That we're zero-based. We're starting from scratch, so to speak. And you'll want to certainly eliminate waste. Number 2, short-term benefits could be emphasised over long-term. Yes, that's a danger with zero-based. And it doesn't say they will be emphasised over long-term benefits. They shouldn't be. But a danger is people haven't always got the time and the expertise to do it properly. There is a danger that they might tend to look too short-term. And so where are we? It's both 1 and 2. The answer is D. Number 4, yet another. Which of the above statements is or are true? The following statements have been made about changing budgetary systems, so changing the way we do our budgets. Number 1, the costs of implementation may outweigh the benefits. That's true. It doesn't say they will outweigh the benefits, but whenever we change anything like our budget system, we need to try and make sure that the benefits of doing it are greater than the cost of doing it. So I say the costs aren't always going to be more than the benefits, but it's a fact that they may outweigh the benefits. Number 2, employees will always welcome any new system which improves planning and control. No. Think about where you work. The employees themselves certainly are not always going to welcome any new system which might change the way they end up having to do things. People don't like change very often. So 2 isn't true. The answer is A. Over the page, 5. The first one. With any arithmetic in it. How long would it take the design engineer to complete the 6th job? And if we look back at the information, Tech World is a company which manufactures mobile phone handsets. From its past experience, they've realised that whenever a new design engineer is employed, there's a learning curve with a 75% learning rate, which exists for the first 15 jobs. A new design engineer has just completed his first job in 5 hours. Note, at the learning rate of 75%, the learning factor B is equal to minus 0.415. Well, we want to know how long it would take to complete the 6th job. And remember, very, very standardly, we can use the learning rule to get the total time for any number of jobs. We can't use the learning rule to get directly to the cost of any one particular one. So the way we have to do it, when it says something like this, how long to complete the 6th job, we have to work out the total time it will take to do 6, to do all 6. And having worked out the total time it will take to do all 6, if we subtract the total time it will take to do 5, then we'll be left with what we want. We'll be left with the time for the 6th. And how are we going to get the total times? Well, I'll write down the formula in a minute, but it's on your formula sheet. The formula gives you the average time per unit for any number of units, or here per job for any number of jobs. So the total time for 6 will be 6 times the average time per job. And similarly, the total time for 5 will be 5 times the average time per job. And now we turn to the formula, because the formula gives you the average time, which is what we're after. We'll have to do it twice. First of all, we need to know the average time per job if we do 6. So if we do 6, y is A, the time for the first job, which was 5 hours, times x, the number of jobs, well, we're doing it for 6, to the power b. And although there is the formula to get b on the formula sheet, so far the examiner's always given you the value for b. Here we're told it's minus 0.415. And obviously don't waste time checking it. If the examiner says it's 415, it's 415. And note, because it makes a huge difference when we use the formula, b is always negative. It's minus 0.415. It's then just calculator work, and obviously you've got to have a scientific calculator. 6 to the power minus 0.415. I go through the steps on my calculator during the lecture. I'm not to repeat it all. But 6 to the power 0.415 negative equals 0.47541. You should be able to do the whole thing on your calculator. You shouldn't need to actually write that down, because having left 0.47541 on my calculator, if I multiply by 5, I get 2.3770. Well, that's the average time, and so the total time to do 6, there'll be 6 times that, 2.3770, which comes to, I'm sorry, I should have left it in my calculator. Thanks. Times, what was it, sorry, 6. I get 14.2623. So that's the total time to do 6. Total time to do 5. 5 times the average for 5. Well, again, using the formula, the average time for the first 5 times, this time 5 jobs, to the power minus 0.415. Here I will do the whole thing rather than write down the steps. 5 to the power 0.415 negative equals, it's 0.5127 and so on. If I multiply by 5, it's 2.56388. I'll keep that in my calculator because the total time will be 5 times that. 5 times 2.56388. If I multiply what I've got there by 5, I get 12.8194. So the first 5 take 12.8 hours, the first 6 take 14.3 hours. The time for number 6 is the difference. 14.2623 minus 12.8194. It's 1.4429. Obviously there are bits of rounding, but if you look at the choices, the answer has to be B. I looked ahead, I saw that it was 3 decimal places, which is why I've done it to more. But there we are, it's B. That's taken me quite a while to write down, and it is obviously, for anybody, it's a longer question than the first 4. But remember, in the exam, nobody's going to look at your workings. So although I've tried to be reasonably neat, then you can learn from it. In the exam, don't waste time being pretty and writing down every single figure. You haven't got the time. There will be time pressure. And again, nobody will look at your workings for section A. So even if you're doing it the right way and make a silly mistake, I'm afraid, if you don't get the right answer, you get 0. It is a speed exercise. Let's move on to number 6. Which of the above techniques could be used by a company to account for its environmental costs? And if you look back, the following are types of management accounting techniques: flow cost accounting, input-output analysis, life cycle costing, activity-based costing. 2 things. Remember, environmental costing, you can't be asked any numbers. All you can be asked is either a bit of written in section B or a sort of statement question like this one. And secondly, well, I'm afraid you've got to go through the note. If you look at our notes on environmental costing, there's a brief description of each of the accounting techniques that might be useful. And it is those 4. All of them are techniques that could be used to account for environmental costs. So I'm not going to try and explain each of them here. Look at the note if you need. But you're not asked to explain them. The answer is straight off D. 7. Oh, back to some numbers. A company makes a single product which it sells for $2 a unit. The fixed costs are $13,000 a month. The CS ratio is 40%. And the sales revenue is 62,500. They want to know what the margin of safety is. And remember, the margin of safety is the difference between the actual or the budget sales less the break-even. It wants it in units. Remember, it could have been in revenue, but here specifically in units. So, what are our actual or our budgeted sales? The sales revenue is 62,500. We're selling at $2 a unit, which is 31,250. What about break even? Well, remember, for break even, the total contribution has to be equal to the fixed costs, because break-even by definition is when the profit, contribution minus fixed cost, is 0. So the total contribution here would have to be 13,000. And the total contribution will be the number of units times the contribution per unit. What's the contribution per unit? Well, we know the CS ratio, the contribution is 40% of sales. Selling price is $2. And so 40% of 2 is 80 cents. And therefore, the break-even units, 13,000 fixed costs divided by the contribution per unit is 16,250. And now we've got it. To break even, we need to sell 16,250. We're actually selling 31,250. And so the margin of safety, the difference, is 15,000 units. Which is that one of the choices? Yes, it is. The answer is A. Number 8. It's back again. In which of the following statements is or are true? The following statements have been made about the balanced scorecard. And always, every exam, there's something, whether it's section A or section B or both, about performance measurement. You must be happy with what we mean by the balanced scorecard and the 4 perspectives. And Fitzgerald and Moon, and their various building blocks. Here is the balanced scorecard. Let's look at the statements. Number 1, it focuses solely on non-financial performance measures. No. Certainly, non-financial performance is relevant, but one of their perspectives is financial. There will be financial performance measures as well as non-financial. Number 2, it looks both at internal and external matters concerning the organisation. Yes. You know, for instance, we've got the customer perspective. For the performance measures, are we looking after the customers, which are external? But then we've things like the learning perspective and growth, where we're looking at factors within the company, internal. So it's internal and external. So 1's wrong, 2's right. The answer is B. On with question 9. Back to numbers. A company, start again. Always look at the requirement first, otherwise we don't know where we're going. What is the throughput accounting ratio to 2 decimal places? It is throughput accounting, clearly. So let's look. A company manufactures a product which requires 4 hours per unit of machine time. Machine time is the bottleneck resource, as there are only 10 machines which are available 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. The product has a selling price of 130 a unit, materials 50 a unit, labour 40, overheads 20. And they're based on weekly production and sales of 150 units. All right, the throughput accounting ratio. You should have learned all the, if that's the right word, formulae, but throughput accounting ratio, it's the throughput per hour divided by the cost per factory hour. So let's do throughput per hour first. The throughput, effectively contribution, but with the only variable cost being materials. So the selling price is 130. The material costs are 50. And so the throughput, excuse me, the throughput is $80. How many hours does it take for each unit? Well, first of all, a bit of workings here. How many hours have we got available? There are 10 machines. They're available 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so the total number of hours available is 600. It says, excuse me, it's 600 hours per week. And it says the costs are based on weekly production sales of 150 units. So if there's 150 units, it means each unit is taking 4 hours. So the throughput per hour $80 a unit, 4 hours a unit. The throughput per hour is 20. To get the ratio, divide by the cost per factory hour. And how much are the costs per factory hour? It's all the costs except for materials. And so there's labour of 40. There's overheads of 20. So the total costs are 60 per unit. 150 units a week gives total costs of 60 times 150, 9,000. We want the cost per hour. Well, it's 9,000 in total. We already know that there are 600 hours a week. And so the cost per hour is, I think, 15, but I'd better check. Yeah, 15. And so cost per hour, 15. And therefore, finally, the throughput accounting ratio, 20 divided by 15, is 2. 20 divided by 15 is 1.33. The answer, therefore, is A. So again, a bit more time consuming, but I won't keep repeating this, but appreciate it's taken me a long time because I'm talking through it, and at the same time I'm writing everything down. In the exam, don't. That would have been much, much quicker in the middle of an exam. Anyway, number 10. Which of the following may be used to close the target cost gap for P1? And if we look back, as company is a manufacturer of multiple products and uses target costing, it's been noted that product P currently has a target cost gap, and we wish to close the gap. Well, remember what we mean by the gap. It's the difference between the target cost. That's what the costs we're aiming for, to get the cost down to whatever the target is, perhaps $10 or something. It's the difference between that and the actual or the estimated cost. Maybe, and this is turning into a lecture, but still, I'm inventing figures. Maybe the target cost is $10. To get the profit we want, we have to get the cost down to $10. Maybe at the moment we estimate the cost is going to be $12. Well, there's a cost gap. It's costing us $2 more than it's going to have to. We'd look for ways of reducing that estimated cost. Now, before anybody shouts, where's the 12 and the 2 come from, I was making up figures to try and explain. Which of the following may be used to close the target? How can we get that estimated cost lower? A, use overtime to complete the work ahead of schedule. No, because using overtime, surely, is only going to put the price up. Because we're going to have to pay extra for overtime. It certainly won't get the cost down. B, substitute current raw materials with cheaper versions. Yes. You know, if we can buy the raw materials more cheaply, there's a way we could bring the cost down. So I think B's right, but let's check the others. C, raise the selling price of P. No. No, that comes first. The selling price will be what we think we can sell it for, and then we work out the target cost. If we think we can sell it for $20, well, you can't raise the price, because we won't be able to sell it for a higher price. So it's not C. Finally, D, negotiate cheaper rent for S company's premises. Now, this is tempting, but no, for two reasons. One is that, remember, this is only one of our products. We're making multiple products. And so reducing the rent, we can't say how that's going to affect simply product P. And secondly, the target cost capping, we actually want to make it cheaper. Reducing the rent in itself won't achieve that. So although it's tempting, the answer, in fact, is B. So that was number 10. We're halfway through.